My name is Atsushi Matsuda. I'm a moderator of today's seminar. This seminar is titled Advancing ESG Agenda, Net Zero Emission Supply Chain Through the Carbon Footprint of Product. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much of this ABA staff and also ACRAA staff, which enable this precious opportunity. Particularly, we'd like to thank you to the chairman, Acevedo of ABA. And secondly, that we'd like to say thank you very much to the speakers who gathered today. And I think it's an excellent panel, including from government official or for bankers and the traders and also data rating agency. And third, thank you very much for audience and who gathered today this opportunity. I heard 400 registered from 37 countries. It's a quite impressive number. So we are very excited in this opportunity. First, and let me spend 2 or 3 minutes to explain what is a carbon footprint of product. And this carbon footprint is a simple words. It's a measurement of the emission of greenhouse gas. I think precise information regarding the emission is a central core for sustainable finance. But how to measure the emission, it's a very daunting task. And precise measurements is a very critical element for sustainable finance because it's linked with the conditions, it's linked with the target, it's linked with disclosure, it's linked with the performance. But this emission includes 2 dimensions. One is direct emissions. Another one is indirect emissions. When you use some input material, this material is also produced by using of emissions. So how much emission do you have to record? You have to record at a very various stage, including productions, supplies, consumptions, logistics, and use and disposable. And those every stage should be accumulated as a kind of footprint. This is a core concept of the carbon footprint. But how can we construct measurement of these ones? How can we gear up with this measurement with the financial architecture? That is quite challenging. Today, we have a very excellent panel, including government official, who is making regulatory setting of those sustainable financing using carbon footprints. Mr. Sano from METI, Industry Policy Department, and Mr. Aizawa coming from Nagase Industry, who is a trading house, who is using this notion for emission strategy. And thirdly, that we have Mr. Orita from a bank, commercial bank, largest bank in Japan, MUFG Bank, and who is quite active regarding to arranging financing of sustainable financing. And fourth, Ms. Kajiwara, head of the Sustainable Financing Evaluation Department, rating agency. And so those excellent speakers is going to explain the kind of what is the secret of this product and how can we making a good, successful structure of the financing mechanism. And those aspects is today's seminar is quite practical oriented. How can we making kind of actual deal by using this instrument? This is a central theme of this seminar. So this is a brief introduction of myself. So let's start. And the first speaker is Mr. Sano, and he's from Ministry of Economy and Industrial Trade. He is a Deputy Director of Environment Policy Division of Industrial Technology and Environment Bureau of METI. He graduated from University of Tokyo Law Faculty and also did a graduate study at the Fletcher School of Tufts University of the United States.
My name is Tomoki Sano. I'm from the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry in Japan. I'm going to start my presentation by sharing my screen. So I'm gonna give my presentation beneath the title of Japan's policy towards achieving green transformation and utilization of carbon footprint. So I'm in an office in charge of green transformation, which is simultaneously achieving both decarbonization and economic growth at the same time. This is where the world is headed at right now. And I'm going to talk about the overall policies that Japan is implementing towards this goal, and then talk about the utilization of carbon footprint within that context. So obviously, green transformation is becoming very important worldwide. Economies headed to achieving carbon neutrality at some point in the future have reached 94% of the world GDP. This percentage was 26% in 2019, so we're seeing a rapid increase in economies heading for carbon neutrality. And Japan feels that we must follow this global trend as well. In addition to following this global trend, recognize that Japan is heavily dependent on imported fossil fuels. The risks associated with this structure has especially become apparent under Russia's invasion of Ukraine. When we look at the lower right graph on this slide, we see that the quantity of imported crude oil hasn't increased as much, but the prices have risen, which is causing a current deficit, which is becoming a part of a trade deficit in Japan. So to achieve long-term sustainable economic growth, we feel that it's important to transform this energy structure and create an economic and industrial structure based on clean energy. So this is what we call green transformation. It's obviously a big transformation of the economic and industrial structure that has been present since the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. So this is a very big challenge for Japan as well. This is also a very big challenge for many economies. In order to achieve these goals, we see that national governments are implementing large-scale long-term measures to promote investment towards green transformation. For example, the EU is setting a 1 trillion euro goal of public and private investment in 10 years. And the United States has passed the Inflation Reduction Act last year, which provides $3,690 billion of government support over the next 10 years. So we're seeing these very large industrial policies being implemented to spur investment towards necessary fields. We feel that along with these supportive measures, the utilization of carbon footprint that I'm going to talk about in the latter half is also an important regulatory, so to say, measure to promote investment towards necessary sectors as well. This slide shows the basic direction of Japan's policies. We decided this GX promotion strategy this July based on the GX Promotion Act that was enacted in May this year. Strategy sets forth necessary policies to be implemented towards achieving green transformation in Japan. It consists of two pillars. One pillar shows the areas that investments should head to. So energy savings is one, using renewable energy, utilization of nuclear energy, and other efforts such as using hydrogen and ammonia, promoting research and development, etc., etc. So these are the important areas to promote investment towards. And the second pillar shows the carbon pricing that has been introduced to promote investment. So this consists of several parts. One is upfront investment support through issuing the GX Economy Transition Bond. This is a national bond that the government issues. Through the issuance on this board of this bond and procurement of funds through the market, the Japanese government is going to use 20 trillion yen in 10 years for investment support of private sectors. This is a national bond, so it must be compensated. So that is why we are adopting a pro-growth carbon pricing concept. It consists of an introduction of an emission trading system. And also that emission trading system is going to be introduced to power producers. And then the quotas for these power producers, the price of the quotas will be decided through the auction. And then the fees collected through this auction will be used to pay back for the economic transition bonds. Also, a carbon surcharge for fossil fuels is going to be introduced as well. So these carbon prices will serve to provide funds for upfront investment and also increase the added value of products produced through nice processes. So this is the carbon pricing concept that Japan introducing to promote necessary through these measures. The Japan is using 20 trillion yen promote 50 trillion yen of public and private investment over the next decade. We think that transition finance is very important as well, and we're trying to promote international understanding towards transition finance. Transition finance and green finance is kind of different. Green finance allows for the immediate decarbonization of several processes, such as the introduction of renewable energy, whereas transition finance is used for processes that allow for the gradual decrease of carbon emissions. We think that this is very important as well, especially as Japan has a very strong manufacturing base, especially in steel and chemicals. Those processes emit carbon other than from the use of electricity. There is a lot of carbon emission from the manufacturing processes itself. So we think that technology that allows for transition for these processes is very important. And to support the transition phase, we're issuing this GX economy transition bond to promote transition finance. The final part of the overall policy of Japan I'm going to talk about is this roadmap. And this is shown in 22 areas, which is very closely related to green transformation. You don't really have to read through all these small letters. The point I wanted to make is that both supportive and regulative measures are shown in this slide. So when you look at the left column, there's a named GX investment. This shows the areas that investments should head in and the supportive measures that are going to be introduced those investments. If we call this the supply side, we also think that the demand side is important as well. The demand side shows regulation and structural measures to promote demand. So we think that it's very important for decarbonized products to be launched to the market as well. But we also recognize that it's very important for these decarbonized products to be evaluated within the market and it make economic sense as a business. So we're also considering regulatory and institutional measures to create the demand necessary for these decarbonized products to be evaluated, which will also serve to promote investment towards decarbonization as well. So as part of the regulatory measures that Japan needs, we're trying to utilize carbon footprint. We think this is very important. As Mr. Masuda has introduced, carbon footprint is a calculation of the total emission of greenhouse gases through its life cycle. And by calculating carbon footprint, this will enable businesses to prioritize decarbonization efforts. So by businesses knowing which part of their supply chain has much emission, they will be able to prioritize their efforts towards decarbonizing that specific process. Also, for customers and consumers, they will be able to choose goods that are produced with less emission. If carbon footprint is not shown, they will really not be able to make a choice. But if the carbon footprint is shown, then that will allow customers and consumers to make those choices. Various stakeholders requesting the calculation and disclosure of carbon footprint, be it governments who want to base their procurement decisions based on carbon footprints. Finance market is also very key, which product or process is being decarbonized and should be financed. Also, customers and consumers are very keen to align their consuming activity with carbon footprint as well. So Japan has issued the carbon footprint guideline this March. This is done by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry that I work for, and also with the Ministry of Environment. The guideline provides steps for businesses to calculate their carbon footprint based on ISO standards. This guideline shows basic requirements, which is necessary to calculate carbon footprint for businesses. It also shows additional requirements that are necessary to calculate carbon footprint in case it could be compared with similar products. So to compare carbon footprint with similar products, obviously the calculations must be done through a comparative measure. The next steps that Japan is trying to make is that, first of all, to align carbon footprint with specific consuming activities, including government procurement. This is already being done in several areas. Some advanced products that have already shown their carbon footprint. We want to expand the area of products procured through utilization of carbon footprint. This consists of two factors. The first is that, first of all, carbon footprint of products must be shown. So this is the first requirement. And then when sufficient variety of products, then the government to be able to choose products with lower carbon emissions. Expand the variety of products with carbon footprint. So we're launching a supported project for industrial groups who want to come up with a method to calculate their carbon footprint. So we want this to, we're supporting industrial groups' efforts to promote the calculation of carbon footprint. And then the third pillar is to expand the players that are involved in this effort, particularly small and medium enterprises. So we think that the total decarbonization of the entire society is important, but in many cases, small and medium enterprises do not have the resources to be able to calculate their carbon footprint. So we're publishing guidelines and other supportive programs to promote showing carbon footprint all over the society and industries. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Sano-san. I understand that you cannot stay until panel discussion. So I taking this opportunity, I'd like to making one chance to making questions. I think the zero emission target is all the entire government target. But meanwhile, I think two government agencies is taking a lead, particularly Ministry of Environment and METI is quite active regarding to this policy area. Can you just briefly explain and what is the role of the METIs to attain over these targets and how making a collaboration with the Ministry of Environment?
I think that the Ministry of Economy's emphasis is on the simultaneous achievement of both economic growth and decarbonization. In fact, carbon emissions fell in 2020 due to reduced economic activities, but I'm very sure that that is not the direction that Japan is hoping for. We want economic growth at the same time. For that, we need necessary technologies and industries to come up with necessary technology to achieve this simultaneous goal. METI, as the closest government organization to the private industrial sector, has a role in spurring investment that's necessary towards decarbonization while ensuring that it makes sense as a business decision. Unless this is achieved, then we feel that the goal of 150 trillion yen over the 10 years, that's a very big goal that cannot be achieved if it doesn't really make economic sense. So that I think that is the role of the Ministry of Economy. I think I'm not really from the Ministry of Environment, but I feel that they play a very big role in the consumers' activities that I talked about right now. They're actually launching a national movement to increase consumption towards environmentally friendly goods. So I feel that they have a very big role in working with the demand side so that decarbonized products are met with a higher demand. This is also very supportive for METI's efforts to increase supply of decarbonized products as well. So I think we're working as a team on both the supply and demand side to promote green transformation in Japan.
Thank you very much for your participation of this seminar. Thank you very much. Stand to the second presentation. 相沢さん、よろしくお願いします。And Mr. 相沢さん is a corporate sustainability office manager of the Nagase industry. That Nagase is a very famous trading industry. His presentation is titled Delivering to Next.
Today, I would like to explain about, first of all, introduction. And second one is what is carbon footprint very briefly. And third one is what it means especially in the chemical supply chain. And finally, I would like to show what's delivering next is that the sustainability linked loan framework from Nagase. Okay, as Master-san introduced me, that I'm leading the corporate sustainability office of Nagase Group. And you can see the figures, you can capture the outline or the scale of our group, but it's not so important. So let me introduce the history of Nagase. We established 1832. And what I want to emphasize here is that we launched the first overseas office in 1901. And because our original business in 1832 was that dealing the dyeing material, natural dyeing material. Exactly, it is the safflower. And that is our corporate color. You can see the red color here. But after that, 1901, the most advanced material changed to chemical. So we launched 1901 overseas office in Lyon, French, because the technology of the chemical, at that moment, the Europe is a great advanced area and still not changed. But anyway, we have the good deal and the engagement with those global players more than 1 century. And also one more thing is that from the beginning of the beginning, Japan chemical industry, we are highly or strongly engagement in that supply chain. This slide shows our presence in APEC area. And you can see simply our group is the #1 trading company of the chemical distributors. So from now on, let me explain about carbon footprint very briefly. So what's carbon footprint? Hereby shown CFP stands for carbon footprint of product. Then simply it is the evaluating system or method. How much impact, environment impact of the product in the life cycle assessment. And life cycle assessment, simply let me bring up one example. So can I ask you that is electric vehicle good for environment or not? So answer is it depends on the conditions. So that means if we produce one conventional cars, which runs by gasoline, and electric vehicles, up to production process, the electric vehicle emit much more GHG gas than the conventional cars, because the battery, when we produce the battery, we have to use much energy or steel and so on. So when we set in the life cycle assessment, so in case we use that electric vehicle or conventional cars more than 8 years, then it contributes to the environment. So when we capture something in life cycle, we have to think about that from the beginning, when we produce or when we purchase the material, raw material of the product, and finally we have to count up to end of life. This is what we call cradle to grave. That is the simple idea of the life cycle assessment. This slide shows that how we calculate the emission. The principle is very simple, that we have to capture the activities amount and multiple the emission intensity, or what we call emissions factors here. So for example, when we use electricity, every electricity, we have to count the emission factors. And that emission factors is provided by those electric generators. And it all depends on which kind of energy they use. So for example, very simple example, if the electricity is renewable energy generated by solar power, this emission factor will be 0. So no matter activity is high to spend a lot of electricity, as long as you use the renewable energy, the emission amount will be 0. This slide shows the carbon footprint. There's 2 ideas for carbon footprint. First one is the product level, what we are dealing here. CFP is the carbon footprint of the product. And second one is the corporate level, what we call scope 3. It's defined by GHG protocol. Later on that I would like to explain what's the difficulty of the carbon footprint. But simply in this slide, you just can learn that the corporate level, scope 3, is much easier than that of the carbon footprint of the product. This slide shows that there is the two kinds of emission factors. The first one, anyway, the primary data and secondary data. There's 2 kinds. And you can see that the primary data, what it stands for is that this data, this emission factor is actually measured by the specific producers or specific factories or for the specific product. On the other hand, that the secondary data is kind of statistic data. So it's updated. The data comes from those statistic data from the government or area and so on. So that's why the data update is every 5 years or something. And also the category of the product is much wide and less than that of the primary data. That's the large difference. And the important point is when we tried for the carbon neutrality of the scope 3, we need the primary data. I will explain the reason later on. So this part, let me explain the carbon transparency in the chemical supply chain. This is the 3 features of the chemical industry. First one is carbon intensive. You can see in the pictures, when we produce the chemical, we use much energy on it. And second one is the materials. You cannot find any factories who doesn't use any chemicals. So third one, you can see complex supply chains. What it means is that chemical supply chain is quite long and complicated. And in this kinds of special industries, when we talking about the carbon footprint, we need the 3 elements. First one, methodology. Second one is tools. And third one is engagement. So let me explain from the first one, methodology. You can see ISO, and the middle one is the WBCSD. PACT stands for the Partnership for Carbon Transparency. And the right one is the Together for the Sustainability. You can see in the very tiny letters, it is the Product Carbon Footprint Guideline for the chemical industry. So from left to right, the guideline contents is getting more and more specific. And also, probably when we use the guideline from the TFS, what TFS stands for Together for Sustainability, probably we can challenge the we can try the certification by the third party. It's such how can I say specific guidelines for especially for chemical industry. Let me explain briefly about the TFS. It is the most influential initiative in the chemical industry. You can see most of the members is the global players, and you can find some of the players come from Asian area. And the good point or excellent point of this guideline is that it's special for the chemical processing. And what's special here is that as you may know that when we produce the chemical, we always generate the byproduct in any process. And this kind of byprocess, the result we cannot dispose very easily. So that's why most of the chemical supply chain is always purchasing the byprocess and create the main product and also creating the byproduct again. So that makes the chemical supply chain more longer and more complicated. That's the features I explained in the beginning. But this guideline covers all of this kind of processing. And also second point is that you can see recently those decarbonization technology diversified, and we can sometimes use the material recycling and also CCS and DAC technology. So this guideline also can cover this kind of processing. It defines in the guideline. Okay, second point, let me introduce about the tools. You can see many company names in the right side. It joins PACT, what I just introduced, Partnership for Carbon Transparency. And also left side, Zero World is the leading company in the market, in the Japan market, visualization Japan market, sorry. And these players, SaaS, service as a software, sorry, SaaS players. And these solutions is mostly producing the how to count the scope 3. That is the corporate levels carbon footprint, as I explained. So this slide shows the players who produce the service to calculate the product carbon footprint. The left side is the BASF, is the leading company from Europe. They provide the software and methodology how to count the carbon footprint in the chemical industry. At the same time, right side is the Sumitomo Chemical, is the leading company in leading chemical company in Japan. They also produce the software service which can calculate the carbon footprint, and this system is free. We can use without any charge as long as we apply for it. So third part, I would like to introduce about the engagement. This is PACT, Partnership for Carbon Transparency. It is conducted by WBCSD. And you can see in in this circle, a red circle, we are the one of the players of this pact. And what we have done in this initiative is that we connect those primary carbon footprint, not secondary, primary carbon footprint across the value chain. So in the right side is the downstream. The final goods is produced by Fujitsu, is the one of the PC producers. So this time, we use the laptop housing to calculate the carbon footprint using the high ratio of the primary data. So from the left side, you can see Lotte Chemical is the chemical producer, and also the SABIC. This is both of them is the global players of the chemical producers, and they disclose the primary data for the plastic, and we Nagase deliver to the molders. You can see in the tier 1 Kunimori chemicals, and during this transportation, we also use the carbon footprint of the transportation. And after that, this Kunimori chemical has molding this plastic to the pot. Then after that, we carry this one to the subcontractor of the Fujitsu and finally assemble. And all the process, we collect the primary carbon footprint data as much as possible. And this method is all comply to the PACT and WBCSD. And it was the really the first achievement in the world this time. And you can see 0 volt and Fujitsu's system is the tool to connect this kind of data. You can see the snapshot of the carbon footprint awareness is that this is the result of the survey which conducted by Nagase. And what we can see here is the most of the large scale, or we can say the listed companies in Japan, in chemical, listed chemical company in Japan has already working on the carbon footprint, and half of them is trying to disclose the result in the market soon. However, it is quite difficult for those SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprise. So that is very challenging because, as I mentioned, chemical supply chain is quite long, and some of the major technology company is SMEs in Japan, because as I mentioned, there's many byproducts during the supply chain. So those SMEs has processing to the another product or another byproduct, and this kind of chains makes the supply chain very long. But anyway, the challenge is how to make those SMEs to calculate carbon footprint to drive the environment value in the supply chain. So up to now, I introduced methodology, tools, and engagement. Most of the players in the chemical industry is driving how to make the environment value in the supply chain more higher to get the future business. But one thing we have to concern is that the incentives for SMEs. So finally, let me introduce what is the sustainability linked loan framework. First of all, this is our Nagase's target for reducing emission about for scope 1 and 2. And this is simply aligned with the Japanese government target, nothing special. But this slide is quite special because we have already committed the reduction amount for scope 3, especially for category 1, is that the emission amount in the upper stream when our suppliers produce the chemicals. So we have to do something for it, because as long as we use the secondary data, as I explained, we cannot reduce the amount of the scope 3 emissions. We need the primary data, and we need the engagement with our suppliers, how to reduce that emission factors. So this framework gives incentives to our suppliers, especially for the SMEs. So because Nagase already committed to reduce the scope 3, especially for the category 1, so that is our intention. We need suppliers to produce means to calculate the carbon footprint and disclose to us, and they need the reduction plans in the middle to long target. So in case they have decided to calculate the primary data for those carbon footprint, this JCR will certificate as a third party, and JCR will help them to prove that those activities will contribute to the environment value of this supply chain. And when it has been certificated, after that, this MUFG is the largest bank in Japan, will give the green loan to those suppliers. What's unique in this framework is this framework is consisted by Nagase itself, but the beneficial is not only for Nagase, but also those suppliers of Nagase. And the purpose is to make this supply chain more, how can I say, transparency and good for environment, simply. So scope of our framework is that those tier 1 is our direct suppliers. Direct suppliers of Nagase also can facilitate this loan. And one more thing I can emphasize is that the second suppliers, even those chemical producers who don't have the direct business with Nagase, can also use it if they prove that the upstream raw materials is used for Nagase's product. So the framework is aiming at not only to supporting Nagase and not only to support Nagase's direct suppliers, it's support for whole supply chain of Nagase, and that's why it works for the chemical long and complicated supply chain. So this is my last slide. That summary, you can see collecting the primary data is crucial to reduce scope 3, especially for those long and complicated supply chain in chemical industry. And second one is that methodology, tools, and engagement has already prepared. But the third point, we have to make kinds of incentives, especially for the SMEs. So that's why those sustainability linked loan framework must work for whole supply chain of Nagase. Thank you very much.
Aizawa-san, thank you very much. And just one question before moving. I understand that the scope 3 can be improved very much because of those. But can we expect any change in the scope 1 and the scope 2 by using of those CFP?
When the company entity reduce the scope 1 and 2, it must influence to the carbon footprint of the product.
I see.
Right? And also, sooner or later, all of the enterprise should follow the government rules to reduce the scope 1 and 2. So it is better for them to disclose the carbon footprint to the downstream as the purpose of the marketing.
So thank you very much, your excellent presentations. Let's move on to the Orita-san's Vice President of Head of Sustainable Financing of MUFG Bank. He led the origination and the execution team of the sustainable financing very long time. That now those sustainable financing office. And he graduated from University of Tokyo or economics department. Also did a graduate study of Yale School of Environment. So, Orita-san, you have 20 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay, so once again, thank you very much for joining our seminar and sparing time for my session. In my session, building on the previous presentation, I will focus on what we are doing for clients decarbonization as a MUFG. And the MUFG Bank is the largest commercial bank in Japan, and MUFG is a financial group that consists of the commercial bank and a trust bank and securities and others. So then could be one of the largest financial group in Japan. As just like other commercial banks in the world, MUFG also made the declaration of carbon neutrality. And our carbon neutrality consists of two parts. The first one is a net zero greenhouse gas emissions from investment in loan portfolio by 2050. That's actually very hard to realize because we have to, we have to support our clients' decarbonization, not only our business itself. And also the second part, just a moment. Second part of declaration of our carbon neutrality will be net zero greenhouse gas emission from our own facilities by 2030. It's just like a scope 1 and 2 of our business, and we are trying to achieve this goal maybe soon, in some years. And in order to strengthen our commitment to carbon neutrality, we joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance and G Funds. And following the requirements on NZBA, as I mentioned, we disclosed a 2030 target, and also we are doing annual reporting of our greenhouse gas emission through publication of sustainability report. Okay, when we consider net greenhouse gas emission from our loan portfolio, the easiest way might be divestment from, let's say, the high emission industry. How to abate sector. Just we divest our loan from these industry. But when we consider the decarbonization of society, instead of divestment, we have to focus on how we could encourage and support the hard to abate industry to reform their business model toward carbon neutrality instead of just divestment. So the right-hand side, you can see the kind of mission of Sustainable Business Division, engagement and not divestment. And your emission is my emission, and your decarbonization is my decarbonization. Okay, so instead of divestment, we are focusing on engagement process with hard to abate sector, and we always accompany with the client's transition. That's kind of our mission. And based on that mission, we are providing various supports as a MUFG and MUFG Bank. So here is the very unique initiative that MUFG Bank is taking right now. Not only providing finance to the clients, but also we are doing some policy works. Actually, the left-hand side, you can see what we have done as a rule-making activities. The first one is the NZBA Net Zero Banking Alliance Transition Finance Guide. So this is kind of the umbrella guidance for transition finance, and using that guide, the commercial banks of NZBA that could consider their own policy to promote the transition finance. And also the second one that you can find, the Asia Transition Finance Guidelines. so we led the process of development of Asia transition finance guidelines. So the concept of transition finance is the providing finance to the steps toward the carbon neutrality. Actually, for example, in power sector, from coal-fired power plant to renewable energy power plant. I mean, sometimes we need to consider the transition investments like mixing ammonia, hydrogen to existing existing facility, for example. For that kind of steps that we could give some label as a transition. That's a general concept of transition finance. And Japanese government, as mentioned by the speaker from METI, they have developed some guidance and the roadmap of the transition finance, but we find that in other countries, Asian other countries, there's some demand or some steps needed to promote the transition finance. So we try to develop some guidelines that could be used in, for example, Southeast Asian countries to formulate the transition finance and aligned with international requirements. On the right-hand side, you can see the different topics. And in addition to establishing guidelines, we are doing also policy work actually, and we published the MUFG Transition White Paper version 1 in 2022, actually just 1 year ago. And most recently, we published the second version of Transition White Paper last month actually. Okay, here is a general summary of MUFG Transition White Paper version 1. As we mentioned, as MUFG's mission, we are trying to focus on engagement with high emission industries, instead of divestment. And also, looking around the situation in other regions, maybe the concept of transition would be a bit different, depending on the region. So in our white paper, we try to explain, analyze why Japan in the Asian region has to take this way as a climate transition to a carbon neutrality. For example, why we have to utilize the existing facility of the coal-fired power plant and also natural gas, in order to achieve carbon neutrality, for example, and also considering the capacity of installation of renewable energy in each country, what kind of energy mix should be considered as a transition process. That kind of information we summarize in MUFG Transition White Paper. And also, after drafting this paper, we had a discussion with the officials of the European Union and also United States to have a deep understanding of what's happening in each region and to reach a common understanding of the regional characteristics to achieve climate transition. And in our MUFG Transition White Paper version 1, the important topic was interconnectivity of industries. That could be related to the topic of carbon footprint, actually. So when we consider the greenhouse gas emission reduction of the society, it's the whole society, we have to focus on the whole supply chain, the interconnectivity of industries. This might be a bit unique in Japan, for example, or other Asian countries, but each industry is connected with each other. So when we try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from one industry, we have to consider, okay, so how we could reduce greenhouse gas emission in interconnected industries, and not, we shouldn't focus on only electricity on the steel production process, and we have to also focus on the automotive, and also each industry is connected. So in that context, in MFG transition white paper, we say that we have to consider how we could reform the business of the whole industry. I mean that is interconnected with each other. Okay, here. Okay, based on this background information, this slide summarizes our support for our clients' decarbonization. So, okay, when we consider greenhouse gas emission reduction, first of all, as mentioned by Aizawa-san from Nagase, we have to consider how we can visualize greenhouse gas emission. I mean, first of all, we have to calculate greenhouse gas emission from our business. And after that, we can consider the strategy, I mean, how to reduce greenhouse gas emission from our business. And based on that strategy, we can make actual investment that could result in greenhouse gas emission reduction. And if there's some space left after these investment for reduction, then we have to consider carbon offset. Okay, in these 4 steps we are providing some solutions to clients. Okay, for the first step, the greenhouse gas visualization, we started collaboration with a Zero World. Zero World is the same company mentioned by Aizawa-san actually, and I'm going to explain it in another slide. After visualizing greenhouse gas emission, we can focus on strategy to reduce actual emission. And in that process, we started collaboration with Tokyo Marine Nichito Fire Insurance to provide some consulting services to the clients for the development of kind of climate change countermeasure strategy, and to disclose that information to the investors. That what we call TCFD disclosure. And based on that strategy, we can consider actual investments to reduce greenhouse gas emission. Here, there should be demand for actual loan, for example. So in that process, we are providing sustainable finance, like a green sustainability link loan and a transition finance. And finally, for carbon offset, if they need, we started collaboration with ENGIE, that's a French company, trying to support clients to purchase carbon credit from ENGIE, for example. This topic has been mentioned by other speakers actually, but before we go to the next topic, maybe better to mention. So as mentioned in the slides of the MESG transition white paper, we have to focus on the whole supply chain process. It means that the scope 1 and 2 means the emission from the company itself. But for the upstream and downstream, there should be other greenhouse gas emission. So we have to consider how we could calculate, visualize the emission from these upstream and downstream process. And also after that, we can focus on reduction of actual emission from scope 3. And after that, finally, this is the main topic of this seminar, but we can address the topic of carbon footprint. Okay, here is a slide about Zero Board that we started collaboration with the Zero Board. That's a Japanese venture company. They are providing solutions about the greenhouse gas emission calculation of the clients. In collaboration with the Zero Board, we are trying to provide a solution of Zero Board to our clients. I mean, so that they could visualize greenhouse gas emission. And also that information will be very important to us because, as I mentioned, under declaration of MEFG carbon neutrality, we have to focus on a net zero from our loan portfolio. Zero Board is a very unique company. Actually, they started the collaboration with the various companies and in the various sectors. So actually, in Japan, there was a kind of Zero Board community they established. Under that community, I mean, in each company could consider further partnership with within that community. So, for example, Nagase also had a very strong partnership with Zero Ball and also MUFG as well. So under that situation, MUFG Bank and also Nagase started our collaboration to provide solution together to our clients. So here it's a summary of sustainability link loan. The sustainability link loan, the concept itself was mentioned by Aizawa-san. Okay, in the sustainability link loan, lender and the borrower should agree on specific KPI targets that should be achieved during loan period. So in the context of sustainability link loan, we name it sustainability performance target, SPT. So if the borrower could achieve that SPT pre-agreed in the process of the formulation of sustainability link loan, the loan condition could change depending on achievement of SPT. Okay, so let's assume that the SPT would be 10% of greenhouse gas emission by 2025. So if the borrower could achieve that condition, the lender, in our case of MUFG Bank, could improve, the loan condition. In usual case, that should be interest rate. So okay, interest rate could be changed if the borrower achieve that SPT, greenhouse gas emission reduction. The most important point, it would be ambitiousness of sustainability performance target. We have to be careful about greenwashing always. So when we set a sustainability performance target, generally we require a borrower to get a third-party opinion from external reviewer. In case of Japan, sometimes we ask JCR, for example, to issue second-party opinion, a third-party opinion to the structure. Okay, so in that concept, this has been already mentioned by Aizawa-san, but this is general concept of sustainability link loan framework for supply chain greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, generally speaking, the sustainability link loan arrangement should be done between the lender and the one borrower. So the unique point of this framework would be, okay, under this framework, not only Nagase, but also its suppliers could get access to the sustainability link loan. Okay, for Nagase, if Nagase is a borrower, the SPT should be greenhouse gas emission of the scope 3 or greenhouse gas emission visualization of scope 3. So as mentioned by Aizawa-san, in order to achieve greenhouse gas emission reduction from scope 3, first of all, we have to visualize greenhouse gas emission. So a certain progress of greenhouse gas emission visualization in scope 3 should be considered as a SPT in the framework. Okay, so if Nagase could achieve a certain progress of the greenhouse gas emission visualization, MUFG Bank could change a loan condition. In addition, if the supplier wants to try to borrow a sustainability link loan from, for example, MUFG Bank, the SPT could be a greenhouse gas emission visualization of its own company, and after that, the report that result to Nagase. Okay, if the target supplier could take that action, we could improve, for example, the loan condition to that supplier. So in that concept, if we see the whole supply chain, it could provide the financial incentives to the whole supply chain so that, in the supply chain itself, the greenhouse gas emission could be visualized more, and after that, reduced more. And that's a very unique concept, and as far as I know, that would be the first concept approved in Japan and also Asian country, I hope. And that's why that was selected as a green finance model project by Ministry of Environment last year. Thank you so much to Ministry of Environment, actually. So Now, under this framework, we are collaborating with Nagase to provide solutions to our clients together. Thank you so much.
Morita-san, thank you very much for your very excellent and comprehensive explanation regarding to how do you support to those and so thank you very much. And let's move on to the last speakers and Kajiwara-san. Kajiwara-san is head of the Sustainable Financing Evaluation Group of Japan Credit Rating Agency. And JCR is the #1 evaluators, and she completed almost 1,000 evaluations. He is heading of this and the sustainability evaluation unit. But meanwhile, she is a member as a government committee, council committee, including to transition. So she contributed and framework setting of Japanese green finance.
My name is Atsuko Kajiwara. It's my great pleasure to have such a chance to have a presentation to you about the supply chain finance in terms of utilizing the sustainability-linked loan framework. So as already Orita-san explained about the sustainability-linked loan mechanisms, so I'd like to explain from the view of external reviewers' point how these sustainability-linked loan framework for supply chain is aligned with the sustainability-linked loan principle. I will share the slides. Right. Okay. So already Master-san explained our company, so I skipped here and here. So I'm going to start from the mechanisms of how sustainability-linked loan works. So this is the overview of the sustainability-linked loan. And let me start explanation regarding SRL from its structures. Sustainability-linked loan is a loan which has conditions to incentivize the borrowers to improve its sustainability management, hopefully to integrate borrowers' sustainability strategy into its medium long-term business strategy itself as well. And first, lenders and the borrower discuss about the borrower's sustainability profile to find out what kind of indicators are material for the borrower's sustainability strategy and business plan, as well as for the society's social and environmental issues. Once they agree about the KPI, the key performance indicators of the borrower, then the borrower asks the third-party evaluation organization, what we call as the SPO providers like JCR, to evaluate whether the KPIs are considered as material in the light of global standards and its quantitative sustainability performance target is ambitious enough to improve the borrower's sustainability profile and the company's value in the longer term. So a next step is to determine the loan's characteristics when they have a contract between the borrower and lender. Lenders and borrower discuss what kind of economic conditions should they add once the borrower achieved its SPTs. Most of the case, economic conditions are to lower the interest rate or opposite. And once loans are implemented, lenders should monitor the progress of the SPTs, and the borrower are recommended to report its achievement status of SPTs annually to the lenders. Here is the sustainability-linked loan principle conditions. There are 5 principles, and it's very small character, but there are 5 key principles. One is selection of KPIs. So the selection of KPI is very important because this is a core idea of this sustainability-linked loans success. And principle 2 is about calibration of SPTs. SPTs must be relevant and ambitious throughout the loan period. And principle 3 is about loan characteristics. This is an important feature of SRL. Achievement of pre-selected and defined SPTs leads to economic results. For example, if the SPT is achieved, interest rates are reduced or vice versa. Principle 4 is about annual reporting of SPT's performance to the lenders. This is recommended to implement it once a year. And the final principle, 5, is about verification. Since the achievement of SPTs result in economic conditions beneficial, so accuracy of the SPT's performance is very critical. So borrowers are required to get an independent verification for the SPT's performance. So these are the SLP's requirements. As you may notice, it seems very challenging for SMEs who has limited human resources, no obligation to disclose its mid and long-term business plan or the sustainability policy. So it seems very difficult to meet all the requirements of SLP for SMEs. In such cases, SMEs can refer to its suppliers, large corporations like Nagase. This is today's main theme, how SMEs can utilize large companies' sustainability strategy. They can explain its ambitiousness for its contribution to the well-established large companies' sustainability plan. So this is an example of SLA framework for a large corporate, and we can utilize this framework to SMEs as well. So regarding the principle 1, it's a selection of KPIs. We are checking the company's mission, vision, and value, which sometimes called as corporate philosophy. We believe that corporate philosophy represents management's long-term vision in terms of sustainability. So we always check it in the first step. According to its corporate philosophy, the company has mid to long-term business plan and also sustainability policy strategy. And in order to realize these plan or strategies, they are choosing several materialities to realize these sustainability improvement. And this matrix in the right-hand side shows the materiality matrix. Usually, the matrix shows that the X bar is the degree of importance for the company, and Y bar is the degree of importance for its stakeholders in society. Top right material issues are considered as the most important issues for both company and its stakeholders. So we call this most important issues as key performance indicators, KPI. And I showed some examples of KPIs in the lower cell, which shows that E, S over G aspects. One is a very famous one, the CO2 emission reduction. And for the conservation of natural resources, for social aspects, maybe protecting human rights or the maintaining the proper governance for the governance side. So you can choose one of these or some of these from their most important KPIs. There are some conditions, and the checkpoint for us. KPI must be clearly defined the following. One is scope and parameters, calculation methodology, definition of baseline, benchmarked against as industry standard and or industry peers where feasible. Then it's very difficult. It's very easier to evaluate. The principle 2 is about the calibration of SPTs. This is about SPTs ambitiousness throughout of the life of the loan. And I take one of the example of the SPTs here. It's about the CO2 reduction trajectory. We compare the several from the several aspects. And one is about do they have its own performance data of the past 3 years, then we can see the ambitiousness for its company itself. And next is a relative ambitiousness comparing to the company's competitors, like the graph shown here. So we compare A company to B or C company, which is very competitive in the market. And the third one is the benchmark. We compare with the global goal, national goal, or science-based goal, etc., which we consider as relevant. So from principle 1 to 2, when we conclude that company's KPIs or SPT aligns to the SLLP, then we are considering the impact of these companies to its value chain. So this is the image of the value chain of A company. In the middle, A company's business activities here. And from their activities, it will produce the output. And its output are going to produce some impact to the market or the stakeholders or value chain. And then value created, or on the other hand, emissions like CO2 are also produced here. And in the other opposite side, it's a supplier side. So in order to realize a company's business activities, they need the input from suppliers. And from this input, it also has a benefit for the output and also the negative side like CO2. So the stakeholders in this value chain are all related to a company's business activities or their CO2 reduction plan because they are connecting each other. So utilizing this idea of value chain connecting each other, we set not only the KPI for a company, but also for suppliers at the same time. When we consider the suppliers' ambitiousness, it can be explained as the contributions to a company's Scope 3 CO2 reduction. So first, we identify that CO2 emission reduction is one of the material sustainability issues for the large company A. Next, we determine SPT for this company. In this case, there are two. One is to reduce CO2 from A company's own business activities, which was expressed as Scope 1 and 2. And second SPT is to reduce CO2 of its suppliers' emission, etc., which was expressed as Scope 3. And Scope 3 consists of several things, like here A company's Scope 3 emissions details. Usually, the manufacturing industries Scope 3 consists mainly from category 1 to 11 or sometimes 15. And so for the category 1, some raw material suppliers contribute to this emission. And for the category 2, transportation and delivery sectors contribute to this emission. And for category 11, user of our company's products contributes to these CO2 emission. So if the category 1 raw material supplier calculate its product CFP and try to reduce its CFP emission, it will result in the reduction of a company's Scope 3 category 1. So it connects each other. So this is a comprehensive and credible framework for supply chain sustainability-linked finance scheme. So I believe there are various supply chain in the Asian countries, and I hope that this framework can be utilized by other Asian countries too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kazuhara-san. Very comprehensive and precise explanation. So, first, and looking at those questions from followers, maybe first question is maybe administrative burden to this CFP calculations. And then maybe CFP is a device to deliver to the precise estimations, but how to measure or maybe how to construct a system to capture those emissions. So from that angle, maybe very external support to establish of a system is very important. What kind of support is available for establish of those systems? That may be first issues. I'd like to hear that the opinion from Aizawa-san and Orita-san in turn. So please send Aizawa-san first.
Okay, thank you very much for questioning. For establishing the tool is very quite difficult issues for all of us because from the beginning, probably we will calculate the carbon footprint using the Excel is the better way. And it's not only talking about the carbon footprint of the product, it is all the same with the carbon footprint for the enterprise or company levels. When we calculate the scope 3, mostly we start by the Excel file because we have to collect the data from all of the organization across the departments, such as procurement or the production or those related organization. So after that, when we get used to calculate the carbon footprint by Excel, and then we are going to start to establish the tool. That is the actual case in what happens in Japan.
Okay, thank you. Orita-san, please.
Okay, from viewpoint of the commercial bank, it's a bit difficult to answer this question because we are not doing actual calculation of the business company. But from our side, it seems like in calculation of carbon footprint, for example, that the linkage of the different system always should be considered. I mean, I understand that there are various vendors that just like a zero volt that provide solutions to calculate the greenhouse gas emission that could be finally carbon footprint. But if the system is not well linked with each other, I mean, beyond one vendor, I mean, the whole carbon footprint calculation would be very tough work. That's just my opinion. And yeah, but I understand that year by year, there's some initiatives like to be aligned with other companies' system. I mean, in this market, so I mean, responding to the request from investor for disclosure, that kind of system would be integrated, I mean, to realize the carbon footprint calculation actually in Asian market as well. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. If your client is asking and the advice and to set up some system, and can you introduce some consultant or what sort of recommendation do you do, Orita-san?
Yeah, I understand that there's that kind of demand. As we mentioned, that we started some partnership. Some Japanese company like a Zero Volt. So in that case, for example, utilizing our existing partnership with Zero Volt, that we have to consider how we could provide solution to that kind of clients.
Okay, thank you. Next, maybe everybody wonder, today is an excellent explanation regarding the application to the chemical industry, which is a supply chain relation is a very complex. But if the supply chain to the chemical or relation can be used, maybe why not apply to the other sectors? And to what extent, and this supply chain is manufacture there, agriculture there, that are many, many possibilities. So we'd like to hear from all of you that under some possibility, applicability to the other sectors. Maybe first, and Aizawa-san.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, it's really possible because, but sorry, one thing I have to say is that carbon footprint of the product is differ from the industry by industry, or more directly, process by process. So as I mentioned, the chemical industry is quite complicated, complex, but for example, those assemblies or how can I say, the process is not so complicated, then actually 0 volt also can provide the product carbon footprint in the system. But in case of chemical, it's quite special, or I don't know the other industry, but the process is special or specified by company. It's better to use those kind of, for example, Excel, or but the supply chain is not so long or the process is not so complicated. We can use those general tools to calculate out the carbon footprint.
Okay. What do you think, Orita-san?
So we actually, I mean, we are communicating. We are in dialogue with the various sectors, and each sector has a different, reality, and also there's a different characteristic of supply chain. For example, automotive sector, there's so many layers of suppliers, for example, in that case, and also the power balance in one supply chain will be very different, depending on the sector. So as mentioned by Aizawa-san, the chemical sector, it's kind of very progressive sector in terms of carbon footprint, and actually that calculation is actually required, to keep business. But the scene around the other sectors, the power balance will be different, and also the core company of the supply chain. Sometimes I try to provide incentive to the supplier, and sometimes just give some pressure to the supplier to calculate, for example, carbon footprint. So from the viewpoint of the commercial bank, considering the characteristic of each sector, we have to be very carefully communicate. We have to communicate very carefully with our clients. Not just building on one good example of one sector. And yeah, had I answered your question properly? Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay,
that's my opinion.
Okay, Kajura-san, I'd like to hear your view of affinity of this concept.
All right. So I think that Orita-san talks about the reality. So I will talk about the theoretically possible solutions. So I think that theoretically it's very preferable for the assembly manufacturing sector, like automobile car sectors. Maybe Orita-san knows the reality, but there are many, many layers. So in reality, maybe some difficulties exist, but the assembly manufacturing sector's core company want to know the emissions from their tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers in the future in order to reduce their scope 3 definitely. But at this moment, the stage is quite a mature market. So they just start calculating their scope 3 by very many assumptions. So they do not have the real number. So once they want to have the real number, maybe these kind of scheme demands are growing faster and faster, I think.
Okay, is there any sector, industry sector, which cannot be applied this CFP?
Well, maybe service sectors or the sector whose scope 3 is relatively smaller than its scope 1 and 2.
Okay.
That kind of things may happen.
Thank you. Aizawa-san, all the company has to making an individual calculation by product, or for chemicals cases, maybe is it possible to standardize the product by product? Well, maybe polyolefin can be this much and the carbon footprint, or maybe a polysilicon has that one. And this profile shouldn't be different among the companies. Isn't it possible to making a standard CFP for product?
First of all, not all the company have to calculate the carbon footprint, because some of the global players of the electronics requires their suppliers to reduce scope 1 and 2. So theoretically, if all the supply chains is scope 1 and 2, especially for scope 2 is zero emission, the carbon footprint should be zero, theoretically, right? So some of the global players already noticed that the time consuming or troublesome to calculate the carbon footprint. That is true. That is true. And also, yeah, I mentioned about the primary data and the secondary data. Those bulky chemical, those is that the scope, secondary data and primary data is almost the same, because producers actually limited. So let's say those those upstream chemicals in Japan, we can count the producers. So even though that is the secondary data, it's just we are talking about the duration. They just update the carbon footprint every 5 years or something, but actually it's very close to the scope 1. Not scope, primary data.
Okay, thank you very much explanations. Next question is maybe some company is using CFP and some others is not using CFP. Is there any differentiation from a viewpoint of lender or maybe verifier? Apparently that scope 3 of the company which is using this CFP is more precise. So should be some treated accordingly, because that company can provide a precise information of the emission data. Is there any kind of incentive for in terms of disclosure, in terms of the lending condition setting for company with CFP and the company without CFP? And I'd like to hear all of you. Orita-san.
Okay, that's a very difficult question actually to answer. Okay, so when we arrange, for example, sustainability link loan with a borrower in which SPT is, for example, scope 3 greenhouse gas emission, as discussed in this seminar, first of all, we have to visualize greenhouse gas emission, and after that, reduce emission, right? So the concept of carbon footprint is, I mean, it is very similar to that concept. So if we calculate the product carbon footprint, first of all, I mean, we have to calculate emission from each process. So if the company wants to commit to greenhouse gas emission from scope 3, as a commercial bank, we have to confirm how the company could address the issue of greenhouse gas emission visualization in scope 3. I mean, collaborating with their suppliers. So if that process is not considered, maybe that sustainability link loan with the scope 3 emission reduction would be very difficult to achieve actually. Of course, it depends on sector, but that's my understanding.
Yes, thank you. What about Kajiura-san?
Well, as was mentioned before, that the CFP calculation market is a very mature market, and I didn't find very few company do this, and maybe the global one or the
Yes,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
understand it's a quite premature that Nagase is a first case.
Yeah,
This
right.
question is about the future.
So I think that the Nagase-san's try is very, very ambitious. So,
Okay.
premature market.
Yeah, okay. Also that under some possibility of SME, how that the big company can kind of systematically and how SME can tackle this one. And the floor question is also asking developing countries issue regarding the constraint and how to secure kind of those and the handicap to what do you think to SMEs cases and the Aiza-san, please.
Thank you. Before talking about those kind of frameworks, maybe, not maybe, the demand or requirement from the downstream will be the incentives. Because if we use the secondary data, another problem is that the category itself is quite rough. So that's why, for example, those chemicals used for the cosmetics, most of the secondary data, it defines as the other chemicals. So for example, cosmetics producers, they cannot capture any carbon footprint as long as they use the secondary data. But as I mentioned, those other chemicals, specialty chemicals, mostly comes from byproduct. So mostly comes from SMEs. And my definition of SMEs is the non-listed company. So there's wide range. So time by time, if they pay for those environment value more directly, if they produce the carbon footprint, we can mark up the product. It will spread very speedily.
Okay.
That's my view.
Thank you much. Maybe time is ending, but at the end, I'd like to hear all of you regarding to your final observations and to what extent. And I think that this is a kind of challenging case, and the first case is the one. To what extent in the future can be amplified over these applications and to making a more precise and a more reliable sustainable financing framework. How do you see CFP's applicability and the possibilities? So those aspects is maybe one by one in the order of the speaking. So maybe Aiza-san first, please.
Okay, thank you very much. One of the things we have to consider is the regulatory from Europe. So as all of us already have to pay attention to CBAM and those battery regulatory, there is most of our DPP, Digital Product Passport. Those regulators all based on the carbon footprint. And also they requires the primary data. And so that's why once Europe started that kind of cross-border, directly speaking, tax, probably other area will not keep silent, I guess. So in that way of thinking, maybe that may drives the carbon footprint when we have the export and import.
The related question is maybe disclosure requirements and also that and incorporation in the disclosure requirement and also kind of taxonomy compatibility. That and do you think and this CFP is incorporated in possibly in the future to the those elements and how relation with the taxonomy? Can you comment?
Maybe as the result, first of all, the reason why we started the carbon footprint maybe is a kind of marketing. to enhance to appeal the value of the product. But as I mentioned, if it turns to the taxonomy, we have to do it to keep the sales. And in those companies who can calculate the carbon footprint can, how can I say, easily disclose, incorporate it. So I don't want this kind of process, but actually, as a matter of the reality, maybe we will face from the external environment may force us to do it. That is, I don't like it, but that may be the reality.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Orita-san, please.
Okay. So as a commercial bank, so considering the current situation about like a climate change countermeasure and also product carbon footprint disclosure, we have to be careful about the structure of whole supply chain always. I mean, as the one of the largest commercial bank, we have many branch offices in Japan and also around the world, and also we have so many Japanese large company clients. So when we have discussion with, for example, large company in Japan, we have to consider, okay, so what's happening in the supply chain of that client, and also what we could provide to that supply chain. I mean, not only to that client itself, but also suppliers. Okay, suppliers are sometimes are based in other region, and we could collaborate with other branches to work together. I mean, to provide a comprehensive solution to them. So, okay, that could be the, I mean, new or good business model of the commercial banks that to provide some sustainable solution. So that's my idea.
Okay, and also I'm quite impressed about this transition white papers. So,
yeah, thank you.
How do you expand over this transition financing?
That's a very good point. Okay, so as I mentioned in my presentation, so transition finance is aggressively led by Japan. I mean, Japanese government is strongly supporting the hard to abate industries in the context of transition finance. So based on the lesson learning from our previous experience of climate transition finance, we of course want to expand that concept to Southeast Asian countries. I mean, we have that some common regional characteristic as Asia countries, and we could, I mean, apply the findings we had in the process of development of transition white paper, for example. Okay, that concept could be shared with the other countries, so that we could discuss the better way of climate transition together with the other countries, for example. That's my comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excellent comments. Kajiwara-san, please.
All right, so I would like to provide a tip to developing countries, possibility of the kind of comprehensive supply chain SLF framework. So I will introduce another examples in Japan, which is the regional government has its own strategy of the CO2 emission reduction. So in order, so one of the regional government set this SLF framework, which can be used by the SMEs based in that kind of region. So regional movements, and then we can, expect some support from the government as well. So this may be one of the ideas for the future to utilize in the developing countries as well. Thank you.
Kyoto Prefecture is supporting this idea. It's quite impressive, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. It's almost time. Thank you very much for very excellent explanations and forward-looking. I think it's a quite innovative instrument. And the precise information regarding to emission, we are going to deliver to the kind of precision in the finance. So I think it's quite critical. But meanwhile, we have to develop a framework. So in that sense, and everybody has to work together. Government is supporting that. So unfortunately, Sano-san is gone, but he's quite supportive for particularly leading to green transformation. That is a very important thing. Everybody, thank you very much. Let's conclude about this seminar.